Is technology at your work distracting you from actual work? Do you spend too much time troubleshooting PC or internet issues? IT Enabled can help. Our team of IT specialists can help you tackle your technology troubles and get you focused on growing your business in no time. Call to schedule your technology consultation. 936-225-3329. IT Enabled. We're here to help.
Well, we are honored and thrilled to have Donna Busler. Donna has worn many, many hats in Lufkin and been a leader in all of them. But today you are sitting here as the executive director of the Angelina College Nonprofit Leadership Center, and we welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tara. This is such a privilege to get to be here and do this. It is my first podcast, so this is my pilot program.
That's okay. I've learned all about podcasts. When Blake pitched this to us last year, he said, "What do you know about a podcast?" I said, "I listen to Kids Bop." So I am learning about podcasts myself. But welcome. We're thrilled to have you.
We're so excited to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the listeners about your background, your history, what you've done in life, where'd you grow up, things like that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's always a fun story to tell. Thank you. I was born in Nacogdoches, but was reared in Redland. My mother was a teacher at Lufkin High School, and I attended Lufkin schools, and my father was a small business owner in Nacogdoches, and so we lived in Redland, so he could go north and we could go south to school. Then I left Lufkin High School and went to Texas A&M, where I met and married my husband, who was an officer in the Marine Corps, and we traveled all over. Never expecting that we would get to come back to Lufkin. I'm so thankful for that. When we did come back, I worked in the banking industry. I was a mortgage loan officer and responsible for secondary market sales. And loved it. It was great fun. Went on from that to manage the small family business, and then had children, so went into education. Worked a while at St. Cyprian's teaching 3- and 4-year-olds, which was so much fun.
I can totally see you doing that.
Oh, I had a ball. It was like play date every day. But went from there over to Carpenter's Way Church, where I was the preschool and children's director. And that's where I found my love of organization and building structure to be challenged, and was able to work there for 10 years and created 16 different programs for both mothers and children, and that was a super experience. From there, I went to the Mosaic Center, where that amazing group of women who founded that organization called, and I visited with them, and it allowed me to put all of those skills to work in building the infrastructure of the Mosaic Center, because it was only 2 years old at that time.
Okay.
So I was able to use my MBA, my banking, my organizational skills. It was just a lot of fun. And what was so great about the Mosaic Center is that we could actually see the difference in people's lives. Not only the women that we served with education, but also their children, their spouses. And I have a little story that I want to tell y'all about later as we go through, about how that continues to play out as an encouragement in my life. So I stayed there about 10 years and got to know the nonprofits of Angelina County, some in Nacogdoches and Polk County also. And what was so great was I realized that many of us were experiencing the same challenges, and through networking and education, a lot of those challenges in the nonprofit sector could be alleviated.
Right.
So then about 2016, there was a group of our leaders here in Angelina County. You know, we have such a philanthropic, supportive community. They recognized the value of our nonprofit sector and how it builds into the very fabric of our community. It is the safety net. Nonprofits will partner with both the private sector, our businesses, and our public sector, the government,
Right.
and create and fill the gap in people's lives. So as our leadership here recognized the value of the nonprofits, they determined that they would test the waters and see if we needed an educational opportunity locally that understood rural East Texas. Because quite frankly, the education that goes on in the more urban areas, Houston and of course our universities and Fort Worth, while it is wonderful, it's very different than rural Texas nonprofits. Yeah. So they put on a conference and out at Angelina College, hoping for about 70 people. Well, 120 showed up, and just it was very obvious that there was a need and there was community support for a learning center to be developed. Yeah. And so what happened out of that was Angelina College stepped up to the plate and said that they would like to have a nonprofit leadership center. Mike Simon and his board, Dr. Mike Simon and his board, put this thing together. 11 very loyal philanthropic donors wrote checks to fund the center for 3 years. And they contacted me and said, would I be interested in giving some leadership to that? It was a very hard decision. I absolutely loved working at the Mosaic, and we had a very high-functioning team at that time. But, you know, our lives aren't our own, particularly in the nonprofit world. And it was obvious after talking with my mentors and different people in the community that was a need and that I could possibly give some leadership and direction to that. So about 2 years ago, we cut the ribbon in October on the Nonprofit Center.
It's hard to believe that's been 2 years.
Do you remember?
I remember that.
Really?
Of course.
That was a great day, wasn't it?
It was a great day.
It was just so humbling to see how many people came out to Angelina College for that ribbon cutting.
Right.
And it was our nonprofit leadership, it was our governmental leadership, and everyone seemed really excited about this. We also had 2 doctors from Texas A&M, the Bush School of Public Service and Philanthropy, Dr. Will Brown and Dr. Kenneth Taylor became our partners. They were interested in building the nonprofit training exercises for rural Texas. And they had approached Angelina College about the Bush School being a partner with that. So they came over for the ribbon cutting, and it was a wonderful day. It was very encouraging because, quite frankly, we are making this up as we go.
Sure.
But what we did first is stepped off into a great deal of research, both with the Bush School and with Dr. Angela Seaworth, who founded the Rice School of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Work, and also Community College of Austin. Barry Silverberg helped bring structure and ideas and thoughts. And so we reached out to all of those resources in conversation and asking them to mentor our program so that we knew that we could offer the courses that people needed and what the content needed to be. So we began doing that straight away, and it was just such it was so well received. All of the classes were full. People were receptive. They were happy to attend. And so what we did was we determined what our goals and values would be. And that is primarily that we want to educate, equip, and encourage our nonprofit leadership.
So tell us just if a new nonprofit director were to come to town or were to join, what could they come to you and learn? What is like the basic, easiest way to explain it?
All right.
Because you give so much information and you give them such a wealth of knowledge. But if somebody is listening to this and thinking, I am brand new in the nonprofit world, what can I come learn from you?
Well, we are going to be offering what we call our 6 core classes every single year, and they will address the basics of nonprofit management. The first being board governance essentials, because not only are we reaching out to executive directors, but we are also reaching out to board members and emerging board members, people who would like to serve as board members. And that very basic course, we call it the anatomy and physiology of the nonprofit world, teaches how to function as a board and an executive director working together. What are your job descriptions? What are your roles? What are your fiduciary responsibilities? How to conduct a meaningful meeting? How to get our executive directors and our board members to partner together to have generative thought. In other words, to really evaluate where is our organization, where does it need to go, not just rubber stamping at those meetings. And so in doing that, that's probably the most important course. But we also offer high impact leadership. That is taught by one of our local experts, because this change, this direction, we call it elevation of professionalism in the nonprofit sector, will be led by the current leadership. And that may be emerging, that may be tenured folks, but so we want them to have the benefit of really sound leadership training. And we have a class in that. We also are offering nonprofit financial management. That, because so many of our board members are not finance folks, and they get those financial documents every
They have
month.
no clue what they're looking
They
at.
have no clue what they're looking at. And it's a point of embarrassment, quite frankly. As I visit with folks, they say, Donna, I really need to know how to read a balance sheet and an income statement. And so we have a class that teaches that, not how to become an accountant, but how to take some of that data, check it for accuracy, what numbers need to match up, and then make management decisions based on the financial situation of the organization. So then we also offer donor development. That's the fundraising cycle. And donor development encompasses finding and soliciting donors, but then more importantly, appreciating, keeping, and stewarding their dollars. So that is an entire cycle. Very often, our nonprofits we don't have the time and the resources to communicate as well as we should with our donor base. So we've learned some things, and we put that in that class. We're also going to offer marketing and communication, and that is how does a nonprofit need to reach all of their stakeholders. Teaches to identify them, how best to reach them in this day and age of so many ways to communicate and be effective in telling our story. And our final core class of the 6 is Trends and Innovation in Philanthropy. And in that, we teach the history of philanthropy in our country, how this all started, and we take it all the way through to things such as cybersecurity, which is a major issue that we all need to be looking at as we are moving towards volunteer management systems and that kind of thing, through the research that we are getting through the Bush School and various United Way of Texas, various resources. Where is the nonprofit sector going? So what we are trying to do with all of these classes is provide a well-rounded knowledge base of the nonprofit sector for those leaders. And again, it can be EDs, it can be staff, it can be serving board members, folks who want to be a board member but have never known how to get into the flow of that. And so those basics are classes that we offer every year. They are affordable. They are only $50 per class, which means that our nonprofits, which typically don't have many extra dollars floating around, can afford to do this. And the networking that comes out of these classes is amazing.
So when you say per class, do you get all 6 classes for $50? Or is it each individual section is $50?
Thank you for clarifying that. It's $50 each.
Okay.
And each class is 8 contact hours.
Okay.
It's delivered either face-to-face or right now via Zoom in 1 hour sections to your computer if it's on Zoom, 2 hour increments if it's face-to-face.
Okay.
It's very doable. It's very affordable. But what we are doing at our center that is different from some of the other centers around the state is we are tailoring our programs to rural Texas. That is a very different, in fact, that is what we're spending a great deal of time with the Bush School at A&M figuring out. Because as you know, most nonprofit dollars go to the urban areas, particularly Fort Worth and Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin. And we need to be in that flow. Just because we're rural doesn't mean that we are uneducated. It doesn't mean that we are country, that we cannot be taught. We are, quite frankly, sometimes I think far smarter for living in rural Texas. But at any rate, we know that there is a different flavor of the nonprofit sector because there's no anonymity. You know, our nonprofit leadership, whether it's boards or EDs or whatever, we see them at the grocery store. We see them at the brewery down on First Street. We all go to church together. So there needs to be a very strong trust built into the nonprofit sector leadership because that's what they're built on. Nonprofits are built on trust that when I give you my donation, you are going to handle it with utmost care. It is going to go to assist your mission, and it's going to be integrity filled. I don't need to worry about where that money is going if it is lining someone's pockets. So because we have this great transparency in rural Texas, our classes are somewhat different. They're more practical, they're more pragmatic. There's a much greater networking effort going on because one of the things we've learned, y'all, is that we've seen a dramatic growth in the number of nonprofits in Texas in the past 10 years. Just very dramatic. And while that is a good thing, it can also make life more competitive for that organization to get their message out and to garner those donation dollars and grants. So what we've got to do is we've got to be wise about how we go about nonprofit building. When I first took this job, it was really great because so many people came into my office to talk to me about, oh, I've got this idea for a nonprofit. And you know what? We do. Many people have great ideas. This is my advice to you, it is becoming increasingly competitive. We are seeing, we know because of the research, the graying of our volunteer bases. We are seeing a dramatic decrease nationwide in the number of volunteers that are available. So rather than saying, I've got this great idea for a nonprofit and I want to get my 501c3, take a step back and spend some time on research. Find out what's going on in your community. Is there someone currently meeting that need or meeting a need that is similar? Go there, serve. Learn the opportunities that might be out there for partnerships or for expanding their services with your idea, because it is very costly to start a nonprofit. And we do know that the number of nonprofits that cease to exist within 5 to 10 years is huge. And it's because a nonprofit very often is individual driven or a group of people driven. And as those founding folks start aging out or going on to other things, if there's not that passion, and more importantly, if there hasn't been the building of the infrastructure of that nonprofit, it will probably fail.
Interesting. So we've been really big advocates of all of the resources that Angelina College offers for businesses, for nonprofits, and we've been really just impressed with how much of that. So kind of walk us through when someone comes and they're thinking of starting a nonprofit, obviously like what you just said, if you're thinking of starting one, make sure there's not one already that's thriving, that's going to compete and take away from that. But when they come through this program, is it like a prerequisite program where they have to go through all 6 courses, or can they pick, what's just most applicable to where they are in their nonprofit right now? Can they say, I really need to focus on the board governance or the marketing? Is that how it works, or do they have to go through all 6?
You do not have to go through all 6. Thank you for clarifying that. All of these classes are standalone. Mm-hmm. They're considered professional development. They are offered through our continuing ed workforce department. Most people know that as community services. Mm-hmm. And each one of these classes can be taken individually, or people can work towards the management certificate. Mm-hmm. And we don't at this point have a time limitation on the attainment of that certificate. So if someone can only take 1, 2, or 3 classes a year, and we offer classes in the fall, spring, and summer, then there's plenty of time to take those classes. That's great. And in addition to the classes, we also offer an annual conference. Mm-hmm. We just had that. Right. It was our first virtual attempt because of COVID, which has had such ramifications on the nonprofit sector everywhere. But we have learned that we have got to really accelerate our ability for things like this, to do things electronically. We nonprofits have got to figure out how to be nimble, how to meet the needs. And all the needs that we meet are increasing dramatically because of COVID. So it has been a very trying time to stay in compliance with staff not being in the office and those kinds of things. But I can assure you what I have seen in multiple counties that Angelina College serves, we serve 12, that the nonprofit sector is very creative. Mm-hmm. They are very dedicated. And with learning this kind of information, these best practices, and how to do business smarter, not necessarily harder, but smarter, they are meeting the challenge, and people's needs are being met.
Yeah. This program to me seems like if someone was in the nonprofit world and they have aspirations of one day being the executive director, this would be a phenomenal program for them to go through so that it would pivot them to be able to have the opportunity to have the experience and the knowledge to one day become an executive director. So to me, this is such a long-range planning for our community and to be able to engage people and to get them early in their careers, to be able to have them ready, in 5-10 years when executive director positions open up, that they can say, I have all this experience and I know how to do A, B, C, and D, and they've been elevated and the platter is being served. So it's a great opportunity for people.
It really is. And we also include that training for board members and staff members, because a nonprofit is only as good as its board leadership. Right. And the board is responsible for the nonprofit, not just that executive director. He or she may be doing the day-to-day tasks, but the board is ultimately the ones that are supposed to be filling that role and looking forward. And so by training current board members, now we have a lot of board members in Angelina County that are very seasoned, and these courses are not something that would benefit them. But what we ask is that the the community of the nonprofit sector look around and see who could be mentored
That's right.
for tomorrow.
Well, because we have so many board members that sit on this, like 10 boards.
Yeah.
You know, and we've got to encourage the younger people to get involved in the community and to serve on boards. And we've got to make places for the younger generations to be able to fill the shoes of the older generations that have been there for years to come. So, you know, if you're thinking about wanting to serve, this would be a great opportunity and a great placement for you to get involved and to get plugged in, so that you can walk in those shoes that have been, you know, have given so much to our community for years.
One of the new programs that we launched this year that I'm so excited about, and Blake, you're a member of that,
Yes.
is called the Leading Edge.
You beat me to it.
Well, the Nonprofit Leadership Center and the Angelina County Lufkin Chamber of Commerce are partnering. And we have the first cohort of 12 emerging leaders, some of them EDs, some of them prospective board members, some of them current board members. We meet once a month, and not only are we teaching board governance essentials, but the chamber has linked each of the participants with a local mentor that has great expertise in the nonprofit world. And every month when we meet, we're bringing in nonprofit leaders that are seasoned, and they kind of flesh out the theory that we're teaching with stories. And they're pretty interesting.
They're really great. So I'm a part of the first cohort that she mentioned. It's been really eye-opening. I mean, I had known so when we first started our video production company, I think our first 11 clients were nonprofits. And I was like, there's a ton of nonprofit business and a lot of nonprofit organizations in East Texas in our community. So it was a great opportunity for us to go in and learn more about that and get more involved in those organizations. And I've been extremely impressed with what it was. At the surface level, I was like, that seems like that could be a little dry, board governance and things like that. But I've been extremely educated by this program, and I'm a big fan of it so far. And also of Donna's organization abilities. If just aside from all of the nonprofit, probably one of the most organized people I've ever met in my entire life.
We need Donna and Julie Walker to run for president.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh,
things
Julie
would
Walker.
get done. Let's put Donna and Julie on the
That's
vaccination program. Everybody will be vaccinated tomorrow. We'll be finished.
Let me go back for those of you that are not familiar with Leading Edge and kind of give you an insight into what this is. So the chamber, the Lufkin Angelina County Chamber, as you know, has had a leadership program for many, many years. With Leadership Lufkin, we have over 700 graduates. With Leadership Tomorrow, which is juniors in high school, we have over 500 graduates. But one thing that when I was interviewing for this position almost 3 years ago, which is really hard to believe, one thing that I pitched during my interview was that I've been I'm a graduate of Leadership Tomorrow and Leadership Lufkin, one of only 5 that have done both because I was a kid here. I grew up here. But I just knew that we had so much more to give as a chamber in the leadership focus.
For sure.
And so really wanted to bring in another aspect of the leadership program, which is where the kind of the thought process of Leading Edge came. And we hope that this becomes eventually kind of leads you into all the leadership programs. So you would start eventually with Leading Edge, then you would flow into Leadership Lufkin, then you would flow into the Leadership Alumni Program, and then within the next year to 2 years, we'll be launching Encore, which is for only graduates of Leadership Lufkin, and it's going to be a high intense leadership-focused training with people from outside the community and all over the nation coming in and teaching that. So when we pitched this to Donna and the AC Nonprofit Leadership Center, it was such a perfect pairing between what the chamber's focus was and what Donna was doing. We could not ask for a better partner with you, Donna, and we're just so honored to have you to help steer us through this first year and to figure out what we're doing with our leadership program, but to be able to piece in all of the aspects of the Nonprofit Leadership Center into this and to be able to pair like with Blake's mentor, I believe, is Bob Sanford, who's over the EDP and the 4B for the city. A mentor, it's just a mentor is invaluable to people, and so we're thrilled to be able to work with that. And Blake, we're honored that you're part of that first class.
I love it. I'm so impressed with it. And to speak to the mentorship program, it's so valuable to learn from somebody who's already done what you're attempting to do and kind of borrow from their brain and their experience. But this program, it formalizes that process, right? So instead of just kind of this awkward scenario of going to somebody like, hey, can you mentor me and can we go have lunch and stuff like that? And people who are, of that level, you get a lot of that, people wanting to take you lunch and pick your brain. And this kind of helps you into that process and gives it a little bit of organization, and there's questionnaires, and there's this structure to what we do in that mentorship that I've already found extremely valuable. So we've been really enjoying that program.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let me just expound a little bit on that. Lufkin has had a informal leadership program going on for years, back 2 or 3 generations ago, when Rufus Duncan and some of those gentlemen and women would find these young up-and-comers, and they would eat meals with them regularly. They would mentor them, and it was an informal structure. But it was very effective.
Oh, yeah.
It's so interesting because one of our current mentors in Leading Edge is Dr. Charles Kent. And it was Rufus Duncan that mentored him when he first came to Lufkin. So the reason we are doing this is because we know that those kinds of efforts to be sustained must be organized and formalized. And in this day and age of people being more mobile and that kind of thing, it's difficult to develop those meaningful relationships like a mentor. And so by fleshing this out and putting it on paper and really being intentional. And I must say, Tara Hendricks is a very intentional woman to work with. She makes my organization skills look very minor. We've been able to take what's been going on here for generations and just make it a more organized, formal system so that it is sustainable. And it's that is what we're going for, because here's the bottom line. Nonprofit volunteers and executive directors are very passionate people, or they wouldn't be doing those jobs.
Absolutely.
They'd be doing something else. And they are helping our communities in untold ways. And it is important for us to encourage them and support them. Because, let's face it, any of you who have served in any of those roles know that it's easy to sometimes get crossways. Everybody has an idea about how it needs to be accomplished.
And a passionate idea most of the time.
Exactly.
Very passionate.
Exactly. And everyone needs to be heard. Well, then what we want is for their service to be joy-filled. Relationships are typically joy-filled if we all know our role. If the ED knows her role, the board members knows their role, and this is what we used to say at the Mosaic, and if everybody will stay in their lane.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So we are teaching how to do that so that the service can be joy.
That's right.
Because I've gotten to serve in the Mosaic Center, that was so well managed because of those founding 12 women. Emily Kistler mentored me, and she taught me how to lead in a nonprofit with great grace and sensitivity, but with also a very high level of integrity and intentionality.
Right.
So I loved it. It was one of the highlights of my career for us to take that kind of model and translate it so that everybody can have those really fun times. I told you earlier I was going to tell a story. Can I tell it
Please
now?
do.
Yesterday I was in my office working out at Angelina College, and I heard a voice out in the reception area that sounded familiar to me. I went out, and there was a young woman, a beautiful Hispanic young woman that had come through the Mosaic Center. when I was there. And the Mosaic Center is an education program for women for life and job skills. And she was there getting her transcript. And I said, well, tell me, it is so good to see you. Tell me what's going on. She had gotten her CNA license. She had gotten her medical assistant license. She was in an LVN program. And she looked at me and she said, and Donna, I'm not stopping there. I will become a registered nurse.
Good for her.
That's great.
And for those of us who work and serve in the nonprofit sector, that's the big payday.
Mm-hmm.
When you see someone's life changed
That's right.
forever,
Mm-hmm.
that's why we do what we do. So when we come to the table with passion about improving people's lives, if we come with a skill set to know how to do that, how to manage these organizations and help them accomplish their goal, then everybody's a winner.
Yeah.
We all have fun. And people like I got to see yesterday, who's now a very dear friend, improving her life. That is why we're doing this.
Right.
And it works. It absolutely works. So we just need to elevate the best practices. We need to support each other. We need to look for partnerships, and we need to get some education.
Yeah.
It's affordable and it's fun. We have good time
That's
in these
right.
classes because we get to know each other.
That's great.
So tell us, as we wrap all of this up, what is on the horizon for the center?
Okay. Well, we have 3 classes that are going to be offered this spring semester. One of them is an elective. It is Understanding Grief. We have 2 of our local pastors that are going to be teaching that. And when we started planning that a year and a half ago, prior to COVID, we had no idea what was going to be going on in this
Absolutely.
community
It's
when
very
we
timely
launched this
now.
class. So I'm appreciative to M.E. Lyons and Dr. Ed Thomas. They will be the instructors. And then we have 2 other courses that are core courses, and you can find those if you go to the Angelina College website and just key in Nonprofit Leadership Center. All of the information is there. Or you can call me at Angelina College, 936-633-4532, and I'll be glad to talk to you about what we've got going. Then in the summer, we're going to have the marketing communication class, and Sally Alvis recently retired from Berkshire Brothers, and her sister Ann Wolford, who owns a nonprofit consulting business, will be teaching that one.
Great.
Fantastic.
Ooh, it's going to be face to face, and I've seen their curriculum that they are writing, and it is top notch. So I encourage you to check that one out too. Also this summer, it is our goal, one of our goals, our long-term goals for this center was to develop what we call a board bank. Many metropolitan urban areas have board banks, and these are a gathering of names of educated people who have gone through some kind of training and want to do board service. After they have done the class or classes, then they list their name and what they would like to do, because you can't necessarily say that a CPA wants to be your financial officer. He may or want to do something totally different. And they can register their names with this board bank. And then when nonprofits need board members, they can contact us, and we will see if we have someone to meet their needs. This is called strategic board development. We also teach that, and it's about developing a board that provides the skills and services and expertise that your nonprofit needs. So it's going to be matching willing, educated potential board members to the nonprofits, and then that will help get everybody in a slot where they feel like their talents are used.
Right.
So we're going to be hopefully launching that with the chamber this summer. That's one of our biggest goals. Then we are hoping next fall to begin offering or continue offering classes via Zoom online, but resume face-to-face classes. Because in this professional development, much of what we need to learn is networking.
Right.
You know, that's what's going to help us steward those donor dollars in the very best way.
Right.
And so we are hoping to resume offerings of all nonprofit leadership classes in the fall.
Great. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Well, we just appreciate you being here so much and telling everybody about this wonderful center that we're so lucky to have in our own backyard. And if you've got questions and you want to find Donna, you can find her at Angelina College on the website, or you can find her at the Nonprofit Leadership Center. I know you have a Facebook page, and all your information is out there. So, yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.
This has been enjoyable for my first
Absolutely.
podcast.
You did great. We thank you so much for coming on. So all of this information is going to be included in the show notes of this episode. We'll give you links to the center at Angelina College so you can learn more information about that if you'd like. And we want to thank you again for listening this week. We appreciate you tuning in every week. We are so thankful and so overwhelmed by the support that we've had for this podcast. And if you want to subscribe to this podcast, please subscribe on whatever podcatcher that you're using. Also, please do us a favor and rate and review this podcast wherever you're listening. That's just going to help other people who are interested in the podcast find it. And if you want to catch the video version of this podcast, it's available on the Chamber Facebook page and on the Chamber YouTube channel. And we will see you next week.